So welcome back, Yogins. I'm Yogi Doug Johnson, and today I have a hopefully what I'm hoping will be a brief talk for you. Last week's talk was rather long. And I want to talk about resistance and avoidance. Before I get started though, as always, I want to thank my patrons on Patreon and everyone who supports me via PayPal and Venmo. You make these talks possible for me to do, so thank you so much. Okay, so noticing resistance and avoidance. This is a very simple awareness practice. So as we begin to enter into meditation and we get better at having awareness of our own thoughts and our own feelings, one of the things that can be extremely helpful and beneficial for us to do is to notice things that we resist and that we avoid. And this usually means that there is something to look at there if there is resistance or avoidance. So I'll give you a great example that I've come across as a teacher. There are many people who identify as spiritual, or they think that they're doing spiritual work, but they will say things like, "I just can't meditate," or "I don't like being still," or these kinds of comments like that. Well, this is a great example of what I'm talking about. There's nothing more fundamental, you might say, to spirituality than stillness and silence. And so we very much know our relationship with the truly spiritual by our relationship with stillness and with silence. So if we can be still and silent and be comfortable and happy and content and joyful and peaceful, that says a lot. It says a lot about the state of our relationship with spirit, for lack of a better way of putting it. If anytime we are still or quiet, we begin to feel anxious, we begin to feel restless, we begin to feel uncomfortable, these are signs that we are actually not in right relationship with spirit. Now you might be thinking, well, what's so special about stillness and silence? I'll tell you. There are an infinite number of ways to speak. There's an infinite number of things that I could say. There's an infinite number of ways for me to make noise and to sing and to make music. Okay? There's only one way to be silent. There's only one way to be silent. And it's the same for everybody and everything. Silence is one. Noise, speaking, expressing oneself is many. Spirituality, if it is real spirituality, is, at least on some level, about oneness. It is about that which is the same in everyone and everything. And so the ego loves the idea that I'm an individual, I'm special, the way that I express myself is unique to me and special to me, and I need to express myself. I need to be heard, I need to be understood. And again, the way that I'm understood and heard is special and unique. Sometimes we might have friends because we think that, oh, you're like me, you like to express yourself in the same way that I do, so we're going to be buddies. With silence, we're all the same. And this is something that you can learn if you ever are able to have the honor of connecting with a community that meditates together. This is something I would so love for the Mahapatha yoga community, to one day have a space where we can gather and we can meditate in silence together. So if you've ever done that, if you've ever practiced meditation or other types of spiritual work where it isn't about your individual expression, it isn't about you being you, so to speak. You actually surrender your individual expression, your egoic expression, and you surrender to stillness, you surrender to silence. You'd be amazed at how much connection and love that you can experience with people where no one's said a word. No one has been able to get up and express themselves and tell their story and relate with your story and say, hey, yeah, I agree with you, and I see it the way that you do, and I have the same beliefs as you do. The power of stillness and silence is, I can't even put it into words. So silence is one side of that, and stillness is the other, being still. I like to say that movement will reveal the condition of our body, but stillness reveals the condition of our heart and our mind. So if I'm laying in bed and I'm injured, I may be free of pain while I'm laying there in bed. Once I begin moving, though, I very often will, oh God, okay, my hip hurts, my back hurts, whatever it is, if I have an injury, okay? So again, movement is important on the physical level for both maintaining the health of the body, as well as our emotional and psychological health as well. And it reveals the condition of the body. But stillness is just as important for our physical, mental, and emotional health. Now, in our current culture, most of the time, we are only still when the mind is preoccupied with entertainment. So if I'm watching Netflix, I'm binge watching a television show on Netflix, then I might be still because my mind is riveted by the story, by someone else's drama, right? So my mind is fixated on that. I'm holding my body still for a little while. But most of us aren't going to sit still in that position without some form of distraction for the mind. I want you to really see that and understand. Even if it's reading a book, maybe you don't like Netflix, okay? Maybe you think the internet is bad and television rots the mind. So you're like, I like books. Well, still reading a book, the mind is distracted and then the body is allowed to be still. What is the one other time that most people experience stillness? Sleep. So in sleep, we enter into unconsciousness in the mind. Most of us actually, most of the time, are dreaming. So the mind is actually not still. Once again, the mind is distracted by the dream state most of the evening, most of the night when we're asleep. And then the body is allowed to rest for a little while. It's not really that different than watching the television. Okay, the mind is distracted by this alternate story, alternate universe, whether it's, whatever your favorite television show is, Stranger Things or whatever you like on the television, and you're watching that story, that world, that universe distracts you from this world and this universe. So again, the mind loves that. Or we go to sleep, we close our eyes, and our mind is now distracted again with our dreams. So both of those times the body is allowed to rest. This is essentially the huge difference between these states and what's called meditation. So meditation, the body is kept in relative stillness, and then we observe how the mind reacts. And for most people, the mind reacts very poorly. It doesn't like stillness. It wants constant change. It wants constant stimulation. It wants to be entertained. It wants to be challenged. It wants to solve problems and to fix things. So in my last talk, I spoke a little bit about the mind being a tool, and this is absolutely right. If we are, through meditation or whatever means you have to do this, but for most people, it's at least going to start with meditation. And again, I need to say it, not all meditation is created equal. It's not all the same. Some meditations are just more distraction for the mind. And again, the body and maybe the mind are not asked to be still. I'm not saying there isn't value in that, okay? So I'm not trying to put anyone's practice down. I'm not trying to say that there's no point in doing other forms of meditation. But in my experience, the Buddhist style of meditation that I learned, I learned it as Zen meditation. And from my experience, many forms of Buddhist meditation are more or less the same. They ask us to do more or less the same thing, which is to still the body and then to begin to observe the mind and the heart. So sometimes when I say mind, I also mean heart. I mean our emotional state, our emotional reactions. Because again, for many of us, once we still the body, we'll find that the heart might react as much as the mind. And for many people, it's a process. It's a slow process, and it's not an enjoyable process. But the way we measure this process, whether it's working or not, is the quality of our life. And so what we want to experience long term, short term, we can have ups and downs. Short term, this is the way life is. Short term, we can have little bumps in the road. We can get upset or set off by something. We can have a difficult period of meditation, a week or two, or maybe even a month or two. But overall, what we want to see is that there is just more peace and more joy with living this human life. This is how we measure whether our spiritual practices are working or not, whether our meditation is working or not. Okay? So, getting still, getting quiet, we want to notice resistance and avoidance. Now, if you are at the stage where you can notice this throughout your day, even better. In the Zen tradition, we don't learn meditation to get good at meditating. We don't want to be like the elite of meditation. We're not trying to approach meditation like athletics. I can meditate for 40 hours in a row. Good for you. It doesn't really matter. Because in Zen, what we're really trying to cultivate is the awareness that we never leave meditation. You could say that, in a sense, we are meditation, that meditation is who and what we are. Now, if that makes zero sense to you, that's okay. Don't worry about it, okay? But if it does, you're beginning to understand really the heart of these teachings in Zen. We are meditation. We are awareness. We are that which Zen is pointing to. As we begin to gain in this awareness, our self becomes just this vast empty space, and then objects and sense perceptions and emotions and thoughts arise within this space. And generally speaking, spirit is in love with all of it. Spirit is in love with all forms and shapes and varieties, all experiences. That's how vast and open and unshakable spirit is. It doesn't need things to go its way. It doesn't need anyone's approval. It doesn't need anything from anyone. It just is full of what in yoga is called ananda bliss. And so when we find something where there's resistance and avoidance, then we want to pay special attention, because that is not of spirit. That is not something that is inherent to our true nature, that resistance and avoidance. Okay, generally speaking. Like you've often heard me say before, there are exceptions to every rule, and if you misunderstand this teaching, then you might end up with problems like with any teaching. And this is why having a relationship with the teacher is a good idea. If something is confusing, ask a question for clarification. Some of you have been reaching out and asking for additional talks, and to the best of my ability, I do that. I still have a talk coming on karma. Again, this is actually going to be several talks on that subject because it is a very vast subject. I've been very busy and I've not had a lot of time to collect my thoughts on that subject, but I've already written 3 pages of material. So I look forward to giving that talk at some point. But that's a great example of someone reaching out and saying, could you talk more about this subject or that subject, or I'm confused about this or that, in the comments, meeting one-on-one or meeting via Zoom. This is difficult for most of us because in our culture, I think the idea of needing help, needing guidance, anything like that is usually interpreted as a sign of weakness. It's usually we feel that we should be able to do it alone. This is a very Western kind of individualistic value system that many of us have, that no, I don't need anybody, I don't need a teacher, I'm going to figure it out on my own, I'm going to do it on my own, no one is going to tell me what to do. Well, if you're a student of mine, you know that I'm not a huge fan of telling people what to do, and everything I suggest is for your benefit. I'm not suggesting you do anything for my benefit. So that's an important thing to understand and to believe. So if you know me and you don't believe that that's true, then it might be problematic for us as student and teacher. This is another topic that I'd love to talk about at some point, the student-teacher relationship. But again, it's a very deep topic and there are a lot of nuances to it. And many people have I don't want to say that there's one right relationship, but I might say there are certain incorrect ways of relating with the teacher or as a student. So maybe one day I'll get into that. But in the meantime, I again would like to encourage you to begin to integrate this awareness of resistance and avoidance into your meditation practice, into your asana practice. So again, if you're doing a vinyasa sequence that I posted and you find yourself avoiding certain postures, not doing them, or while you're doing them, again, creating resistance in the heart and the mind, then this is something that we want to begin to notice, and we want to begin to question, why am I resisting this? What is going on here? And again, sometimes there's a simple answer. Oh, there's a lot of pain. Okay, so physical pain in a certain position. Again, if you have a good relationship with your teacher, this can be expressed to the teacher, and a good teacher will be able to give you alternatives, or she will simply say, this is not a good thing for you to do, ever. Or as long as that pain is there, you should avoid this technique. Now, this can be true of anything, not just asanas or postures. Pranayamas can be the same way, meditations can be the same way. So we want to have that kind of open communication with our teacher where the teacher should, again, like I did earlier in this talk, tell us what to expect. So again, if you're following me as a teacher and listening to my advice and you're not experiencing this expansion of peace and joy in your life, overall, long term, Again, short term, even sometimes for periods of a year or even years, we might go through periods of like a dark night. But again, this is something we can reach out to the teacher with and ask, is this normal? Is this to be expected? Am I missing something? Am I doing something wrong? And the teacher should be able to help guide us. The teacher very much is a guide. Another way of thinking of a teacher is very much like a doctor. So if a doctor prescribes something to you, a medication, and says, oh, you should feel better in a day or two, you take the medication, and not only do you not feel better, you start to get nauseous and vomit all the time. You would turn around and tell the doctor, wouldn't you? You wouldn't just say, oh, well, that's not working, forget it. I'm just going to go on with this pain or this problem, stop taking the medication, and I'm not going back to the doctor. But yet this is what people do with spirituality all the time. They learn a meditation, they learn a technique. The teacher, unfortunately, oftentimes teachers don't tell what you should expect from a technique. Now, this isn't to say that some techniques don't take a long time to bear fruit. This is true as well. So it's not about instant gratification. Okay, that's been my experience, and I have not met one teacher who I feel has any legitimacy who promises instant results and instant gratification. Very often spiritual techniques, at least at the beginning, taste very bitter, and this is even in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna will talks a little bit about techniques, yoga, at first having a bitter taste, and then over time it tastes like nectar. And other things that taste sweet in the short term, right? Like, for instance, sweets, right? Sugar tastes good. Okay, I'm going to have more of that. I'm going to pleasure myself. Very often things that are pleasurable in that way, if we indulge in them, they actually lead to sickness and illness. So very often the thing that tastes bitter in the short term, when I first, it's like, oh God, really? I don't want this. In the long term, again, we feel, I'm just experiencing more peace and more joy in my life, versus a thing that's easy, that is sweet, that I like to do, I enjoy. And again, there's nothing wrong with pleasure or enjoying yourself. In the yogic perspective, this is a natural outcome of pursuing our highest as human beings, which is called yoga. Some of you have heard me talk about yoga, boga, and roga before. Okay, it's actually yoga, roga, and boga. And I don't want to talk about that today, but this is an ancient teaching that basically tells us if we pursue our highest, then we get pleasure and enjoyment. And that has been my experience. If we pursue simply pleasure and enjoyment alone, then we usually get sickness and dysfunction and problems. Okay? All right, everyone. So again, in your practice, your awareness practice, which should be all the time, you don't ever want to leave meditation once you understand what meditation is. And again, essentially, you are meditation. Your whole life, your whole self, what you consider yourself, your body, your mind, everything is contained in meditation. Okay? When you understand that, then you begin to notice resistance and avoidance. Where these things come up, this is often a gold mine for you in terms of awakening, of awareness. And generally speaking, those who are doing real spiritual work recognize the more awareness, the more peace, joy, and happiness. Okay? The more awareness, the more we're aware of things. So noticing resistance and avoidance and not giving them credence, not believing, oh, that's just the way that I am. I just don't like this. I just don't like that. I just avoid parties and crowds and I just feel anxious when certain people say certain things, this is a mistake, because none of these things are part of our true nature. Our true nature is peaceful and joyful, full stop. Okay? Now the human side has much wider range of experience, and that's fine, that's beautiful. It's part of being human. We're not trying to deny our humanity and our human side and the range of emotions that are possible as a human being. But what we'd like is for those range of emotions and experiences to happen within this bigger field of loving awareness. Again, what I'll call Zen or meditation. I could also call it yoga. I can also call it your true nature. Okay, so when we identify with that, then we can allow the human, the individual, the ego, whatever you want to call it, to have a full range of experiences, which is part of the beauty of being human. Not trying to limit our human experience to just, pleasure, which isn't possible. This is not possible. But when we allow the full range of our human experience and we allow others to be human, then we start to experience this peace and joy that is inherent in our nature. And again, our true nature is in love with you, with me, with the world as it is. Okay? And again, I know this is not a statement that makes sense intellectually. I know on the human level, we may be horrified by things that we see in the world. And there's nothing wrong with that, as long as we can keep that background of peace and joy. We can fight for equal rights. We can fight for fairness, equality. We can fight for better treatment of the planet. We can fight for all of these things, but we fight with peace and love in our heart. We don't fight with anger. We don't fight with judgment. We don't fight with condemnation. We're not fighting another. There is no other to fight, okay? So it's a play. It's a dance. It is a show, if you will, that we are doing with ourselves. It's a play, a movie that we are creating with ourselves, and we want it to bring us joy. We want it to bring us joy. So the human ups and downs are part of what makes it interesting. It's part of what makes it entertaining. But on a spiritual level, we don't want to lose that foundation of peace and joy, love and compassion. It is what you are on your deepest level, and that's what we want to identify with on a core level. And then we don't want to deny the human. We instead want to embrace the human side, and that's how we free the human. That's how we learn to love our humanity and everyone else's humanity. And that's how we can eventually forgive ourselves, forgive others, forgive the world. And it's very, very important that we do that. So again, noticing resistance, noticing avoidance. What do you resist? What do you avoid? Is it stillness? Is it silence? Is it crowds? What is it? Okay, feeling it inside of you. Okay, being aware of that. All right, everyone. As always, if there's any way that I can help you, please reach out and let me know. It could be that I'm unable to, either just because I don't have what it takes as a teacher to help you, or maybe timing, perhaps distance, who knows. But I always love to try and help. And so if there's any way that I can assist you, you feel, if you get the sense, listen to this, I think that contacting Douglas could help me if I can ask him this question, if I can talk to him about this problem I'm having. I think that would help. Then please do that. And as I think most of you know, I'm running everything on a donation basis these days. So don't let money stop you. If you want to reach out and help, I can use the help, absolutely. But that is not my main motivation for doing what I do. Okay, thank you for listening. Namaste, and have a beautiful day.